Okay, I think I'm now on. I had some technical difficulties there. I think we are now actually live and on, and hopefully some of you can see me. Hopefully we're now in it all together. I don't know if some of you did see me before and didn't see me before, but there was some confusion there and some technical difficulties, but I believe we are now all here. So, hello everyone, in case I didn't see you before and did see you before, but I'm Marco DiGeorge. I'm the co-founder and instructor at Truthful Acting Studios, and we are now live. Okay, Dee just said all is well now, so you're on with us, Dee. Thank you for being here. And for everyone else, we have a chat feature. Please interact with us. Please say hi. Hello from Chicago, Shelly. Thank you for joining us. We love Chicago. Actually, I have a lot of family there. Love it. So thank you for joining us from there. So it's great to have you with us. This is, I'm going to say, take two, because we had a false start with this. We had some technical difficulties, but now we're back. So that was the delay, and I apologize for that. From LA, Asta, good to see you. So from all over, it's great to have all of you on. We have this chat feature here. So if you're new to our webinar format, the chat feature is for you to interact with me during this. So please go ahead. Any questions you might have, go ahead and throw into the chat. And I'll try to get to everything before the end of our session. Since we started a little bit late, I'm gonna make sure we get the full hour into this today. Samantha's with us today, and she will be she's going to be kind of administering the chat too. So any questions that she can answer, she will take care of that. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. We are officially here now. Okay, so today's topic is we're going to be talking about the Meisner Technique. And it's the technique of acting that everything we do at Truthful Acting is based on. And so from certain times, I like to pull back and say, okay, what is the Meisner Technique? Because it's a term that is thrown around the industry quite a bit, different techniques of acting, and the term Meisner gets taught, at least conceptually, from an early age. I mean, from high school, sometimes it's taught, definitely in the colleges, the concept of Meisner is taught. But what I find is many people really don't understand what it really is, or what it represents, or where does it come from, this thing called the Meisner Technique. So I'm going to give you a very quick history synopsis of this, and then we're going to move on to some other things. And again, please, any questions you have, any interactions, please join us in the chat. I would love to hear from you and interact with you live as we do this. So, okay, so first of all, the Meisner Technique is based on a person named Sanford Meisner, who was in kind of like mid-1900s here in the US. He was well known as an actor, director, and an acting teacher for many, many, many years, up until the 1990s, where he passed away. So Sanford Meisner is somebody that I look at and say, wow, this technique is something that I really adhere to. And I'm going to explain a little bit why later. But where it all comes from is back in early 1900s. This is where it really started. There was a Russian actor and director named Konstantin Stanislavski. And Stanislavski was the one who was known, or is on record, for kind of revolutionizing acting. And really what it came to was changing the style of acting from something that was called representational. Representational acting for many years, I mean hundreds of years, Greek theater, Roman theater, was where actors would go into a pose and represent the feeling of what the character was doing as a narrator kind of brought the audience through what was happening. So it was represented on stage. It wasn't really happening. Later, it turned into more where the actors were speaking, and they still spoke their lines, but it was still very actory, as we like to call it. It was representing what was happening instead of really living in those moments. Well, Stanislavski wanted to look at how do we change that, and what is that threshold where an audience, instead of knowing they're watching a play, they feel like they're watching something authentic, like a real moment that's occurring before them. And so Stanislavski, who was a lover of psychology and sociology of the times, studied that and did a lot of social experiments to see at what point does he convince somebody that he actually is this character. So, for example, he would go to a train station, and he would dress up like a bum, and he would ask for change. And so he wanted to see at what point would someone believe that he was actually a bum at the train station and doing this. Like at what point was it convincing? And so he realized that it was about the commit. How much do you commit to that role? How far do you go into it? And that level of commitment, really being in that moment, really saying the things you have to say. Don't perform them, but really say them. Really feel the things you have to feel. Those went a long way in getting an audience or whoever's watching to believe in what's happening. And so he started to develop a new technique and bring this just very basic concept into acting. And he started directing and training his actors in that way of really committing, really being in that moment, really feeling certain things. Well, one of the biggest struggles of acting, and what he struggled with at the time, was authentic emotion. How do we do that? How do we bring out authentic emotion when it's called for in a scene? And so, being a lover of psychology and sociology that he began to experiment with something that is used in psychology, which is something called emotional recall. It's recalling an emotion from a past moment. Now, this is very sound in the psychological world and is actually used in trauma therapy and some other things. But, it was a pretty big risk to be used at the time in acting, and it was one that he later found didn't work. But what emotional recall is when you go through something in life, anything that's deep emotion, especially trauma, you store that in your body. You store the emotion and that experience so it can be processed later. And when you store that experience, it means it's there to access. And so part of emotional recall means to go into that past moment, to kind of revisualize those past moments in order to grab that emotion and bring it to a present moment. So while that psychologically works, it does. The problem is when we go into past trauma, there's a lot of other stuff that comes along with it, the trauma itself. And there's no way as the actor to disconnect from that. So while Stanislavski experimented with this, he also found that it wasn't the best mechanism for acting, and then later he went into imagination work. Okay, so let's go over and then jump over to the U.S. The U.S., Sanford Meisner was involved in something called the group theater, which has many other artists involved. It was kind of like a national theater at the time. In the group theater had Sanford Meisner, Stella Adler, which is another big technique in the industry, Lee Strasberg, which is something that is known as the method today. And so you had all of these other people kind of working together to figure out how to revolutionize acting in the US. And at one point, they watched a touring show of the Moscow Art Theater, which Stanislavski was involved in, the Moscow Art Theater. And they came over and they did a show, they watched it, and were like, this is amazing. This is where we need to go with acting here in the US. And so they started studying that and trying to work together to bring that into a modern form of acting over in the US. And so while it worked for some time, they started disagreeing on one of the concepts that Stanislavski had tried, which is this thing called emotional recall. Meisner and Adler did not like it. They felt it was dangerous to their actors, and it wasn't something that actors should be asked to do to go back into past trauma. Lee Strasberg felt it was too strong of a tool to abandon and wanted to continue with it. And this simple disagreement disbanded the group theater. They all went on their separate ways. Adler and Meisner just could not accept that in any way you had to sacrifice your actor for the art. It was something that just, we don't want to damage the actors. Where Strasberg's feeling was, it's all for the best of the production. It doesn't matter what happens to anyone along the way, collateral damage type of thing. And so this is where they got into a disagreement. So Lee Strasberg went on and created what is now known today as method acting, which still, to the root of its emotional work, is emotional recall, which I personally find extremely dangerous to use. Is it effective? Yeah, it works. But just because something works, it doesn't mean you should use it. So Stella Adler went on to create her own approach, which is the Stellar Adler approach, and that is based strongly in imagination and imagination work. And that's actually very effective. We have the Stella Adler Conservatory in New York, and it's a great place to train. And then also there's Sanford Meisner. Sanford Meisner is one of my role models, and he developed what is of course called as the Meisner approach or the Meisner technique. And the reason I really appreciate Sanford Meisner and the work that he did is he kind of took a step back and said, okay, what's really the issue with acting? What's really the problem as far as what is the one thing when an audience either believes what's happening or doesn't believe what's happening? And so he came up with this very simple thing, which is based in modern psychology. And he said, well, actors are self-conscious. And if they're self-conscious, they therefore don't listen. And listening is the key to acting. Okay, so if listening is the key to acting, but the problem as an actor, just like a human being, we're self-conscious, well, that breaks this idea of listening. Now, when we're talking about listening, we're talking about something that's called active listening. Active listening is we're not just listening to hear, we're listening to be affected and respond. Now, it's what human beings do every single day. But all of a sudden, when we're on stage and the lights are on us and we have to say lines of dialogue, we become very self-conscious, meaning the focus is inward. The focus is back on the self. So because of that, when the focus is over here, meaning when I'm thinking about what I need to say, when I'm worried about how I'm saying it, when I'm worried about if the audience is going to like me or not, of all of those self-conscious behaviors, if I'm over here, then I'm not fully outward focused on the world around us. Well, if I'm not outward focused, then I'm not truly listening. I'm not listening with the intent of understanding, or I'm not listening with the intent of then responding. And so it breaks this thing we call the invisible thread, which is a connection we have between human beings. It breaks this authentic flow. And so he developed an entire approach which is based on the ability to really talk and really listen. It's based on putting all of your focus outward, taking any bit of self-consciousness we have and shed it away. Because anytime we're looking inward, we're not fully listening outward. So we need to let go of that, put all of our focus outward. And so he developed a very powerful, yet somewhat simple technique to acting that is based on outward focus. The more we can be over there, the attention on our partner, really listening right now of what's being said to us. Not just hear a line of dialogue, that's different. Because of course, as an actor, I can hear a line of dialogue and respond with my next line of dialogue, but there's no life happening in between. But if I really listen as a human being to what my partner is saying to me, and I take it in, I take it to heart, I allow it to affect me, and then come back out with a response, which is my next line of dialogue, then it will be authentic. It will feel to an audience more like a conversation. So that was the whole thing. He's like, well, we can't get to anything else. I can't worry about emotion, or I can't worry about technique, as for acting technique, or how to work on stage, or how to work with a camera, or how to work with anything else. We can't worry about any of that other stuff if we're inward focused. So his entire technique is based in this one simple thing. And I got to tell you, it's powerful. When I learned early on, I learned about Meisner. I learned about all of them, right? But you learn about them at a more superficial level, kind of at a distance. You learn certain pieces, and then that's it. So many forms of Meisner that's taught in high school or colleges, it's a very simplistic version of the overall approach. And so when you're first introduced to that as an actor, I know I was too. I'm like, I don't really get this. I don't see, how it really applies. And so sometimes we discount it. But the truth is, when I really got into it and studied it, when I really went into depth with it, I found that is one of the most powerful things I have ever done in my life. Not just as an actor, but also as a human being. And this is something else that Sanford Meisner told us. He said that in order to be a better actor, we must first become a better, more fully functioning human being. Because as an actor, we can't have these things called blocks. Blocks are things that we have in our life that stop us from feeling certain things that we need to feel. So let's say my character is going through something very emotional and I need to feel that. Well, if I'm blocked in my life, in my actual life, day to day, I don't allow myself to process certain emotion, then there's no way I can magically process that as the character. So what I'll end up doing is then going back to representational. I'll show what it looks like to be devastated. I'll show what it looks like to experience loss, which is false. Meisner said, no, we need to open ourselves up first. We first need to learn how to truly exist in a moment and then fully feel everything that is happening in that moment, and then fully express everything that we're feeling. And only then can we start now working on different techniques and applying it to script and everything else. So, I absolutely love it. It has changed my life completely. Because as you're working in this outward focused way, the more you do it, I've been doing this for a very long time now, but the more you do it, it becomes part of your life. I see the world in a very outward focused way. I know what it truly means to exist in a moment. And I can also identify times when I'm not in the moment. I know what it means to fully feel and give yourself permission to feel everything that we're doing, and then fully express those feelings. So it really has, and it's not just on stage, it's in my entire life. And it's completely, adjusted it for the better for me. And, many of the students say the same thing. It's the approach is not just for acting, it's for life. So anyway, that's why I love this approach, is because I think it makes us better human beings. Because in the world, either you or you'll know people around you, is you'll know people that are blocked, or they pull back, they don't express, they don't feel the things that they're feeling. Or maybe you're having a conversation with them and they're not with you in that moment. You can tell when you're talking to somebody and they're not really there. They're distracted, they're in their mind, they're thinking about something else. Well, it's the same thing. And so you can tell these things. And so it actually makes you more present in life. It will enhance the actual relationships you have, all of these things. And so when Meisner developed the approach to acting, he also developed the approach based in modern day psychology. He based an approach that makes you a better human being. And that's why I love teaching this approach. So that's basically where we are right now as far as who is Sanford Meisner. Now the technique, we're talking about outward focused, so that's the basis of it. But it goes much deeper. There's very multiple levels. So when we start teaching the Meisner technique at our studio, we start with outward focus. That's the beginning thing we start on. But then there's also, we get into something called personal meaning. So there is that aspect of it, because Lee Strasberg did have a tool for that. He used emotional recall for general emotion or specific emotion, even, and how to make something very personal. Well, Stella Adler, Sanford Meisner, both went in their own direction using imagination work. So the Meisner technique uses the ability to create something out of your imagination that is just as powerful, if not more. I believe it's more powerful than using anything real in your own life. And the great thing about using your imagination is it keeps you safe. It absolutely 100% keeps you safe. Meaning it doesn't, when we're not working from reality, when we create a fantasy and we work from that, we can go all in. We can feel every moment of it. But when it's over, we can disconnect because it wasn't real. And so it's another big part of this approach is something called the imaginary circumstance. And that is part of what allows us to create something. And basically an imaginary circumstance is a what if. For example, in your life, if you've ever worried about anything, that's an imaginary circumstance. Now, I know you'll say, well, but what I'm worrying about is real. I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's based in real people and it's based in real things and real events. But when you worry, when you're projecting out into the future about something, you're creating a potential outcome which has not occurred. And so that worry in that moment becomes an imaginary circumstance. You're creating, well, what if this happens? Well, essentially, that's the basis of this work. What if this happens? And so we learn how to use that. We learn how to process that and use that idea of creating these what ifs and then learn how to step into it and access that. And then finally, we have something else called the reality of doing. And this is kind of the three basic elements to this. The reality of doing is whatever we do, we really and fully do it. And that just means like simple tasks, right? So if I'm going to take a drink of water, I'm going to literally and really take a drink of water. I'm not going to pretend to do it. So very simplistic type tasks that we see actors do all the time, the more we fully do those things, the more it grounds us into that reality. And then also even with each other, the more we fully interact with each other, the more we fully fight for what we need in a scene, the more we fully do those things, the more authentic it is. Okay, so I received several questions coming into this, so I want to make sure I address those as we go through, because they're going to actually help us get through the other things I want to talk about anyway. So I'm going to start going through the questions, and again, if you have any specific questions, please put them in the chat, and I will see if I can get to those as well. Well, funny enough, the first one, why did I choose the Meisner technique? And again, I find it to be the safest approach out of all the ones that I've experienced. Safest in the sense where it doesn't ask you as an actor or as a human being to be anything more or less than you actually are. It simply asks you to be you, and I think that's so incredibly important. In fact, it invites you to be the fullest version of who you are deep at your core. Not the part of you that is socially conditioned and the part of you that hides and wears masks for your social world, but your actual deepest self. It invites you to do that. So so that's something that I love it because it's safe and it's powerful. I believe safety in acting is critical. So, an actor has to have physical safety, emotional safety, intimate safety. And I actually have another session that is on just safety. But I believe that that's one of the most important things to me. So this approach, one of the reasons I chose it is, one, I find it to be safe. Two, I love psychology. That's one of my passions. And so to find a technique that is based in psychology that I know, I love, and I understand was also great, and it's effective. I've been teaching this for a very long time now, and I've been using it for even longer. And so, as you know, as I've been utilizing this as an artist, I have found it to be incredibly effective each and every time. You know, the only times that you might find it not as effective is if someone is not willing to do the work. But that's a different discussion. But actors that apply it, man, it works amazingly. So that's why I chose and still continue to choose the Meisner technique of acting. All right, next question. What are common misconceptions about the approach or acting in general? Okay, so misconceptions. Well, the biggest misconception of the Meisner approach is Meisner is, if you go to high school, if any of you had like a general acting techniques class in high school or college, that's a class where they will go over like kind of several different approaches maybe during a semester and give you kind of an introductory thing. Well, most of that, when it has to do with Meisner, is something called the repetition exercise. That's the most well-known thing coming out of the Meisner technique, because it's the first step. So many more actors are involved with the first step, right? Because they've done that in different classes. Repetition is simply where two people sit across from each other, and one person makes an observation, and then we repeat that back and forth, back and forth. So, for example, it's, you know, it could be like, you have brown eyes, and I would say, I have brown eyes. You have brown eyes. I have brown eyes, and we go back and forth until something new happens, and then we repeat that. So that's the whole kind of basic thing. But the misconception is that that's the approach. That's actually something that I hear. It's like, oh, I don't like the repetition game, and you know, that's what Meisner is. And it's like, no, the repetition game is the beginning approach. It's one of the beginning tools of learning outward focus. And then outward focus leads into a deeper connection as human beings with each other, as actors. Outward focus then leads to the reality of doing. Whatever we do, we really do it. Outward focus then leads to the ability to use the imaginary circumstance, and while in the imaginary circumstance, still maintain the outward focus. At Truthful Acting, we call it the core. It's the core of the work because it's at the center of everything else we then layer on top of it. So the misconception about the approach is that the repetition is the technique, and it's the beginning of the technique. As far as acting in general, the biggest misconception is that acting is easy, which it's not. Or acting is something that you don't need to study hard at, which is not true. Actors study incredibly long and hard to do this. And what I would do is I would point to all of the brilliant European actors, for example, and you see them come over and they're just so good at what they do. They're not naturally good at what they do. They're good because they have studied for years and years and years on their craft. So acting is something that requires a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of training. And that's a misconception that we have about acting before we truly understand what that really is. All right, so I had let's see, a question in the chat. Are there any resources to detach from a character you've portrayed if their story is a lot to take, especially since this method is the safest approach? So, yeah, that's a good question, right? So how do we step in, and then how do we step out? And that's part of what I teach, is when we step into this thing called character, we also have to learn how to step out. So we have a part of the process, and this is, you know, as we get more advanced in, but part of the process is something called personalization. Personalization is where we take the words and the actions and the events of a character, it's in a story, and we make them truly our own. And this can be, it's a very personal process. It's called personalization, right? We're making it very personal to us. But we use our imagination to do that. And by using the imagination, it causes us the ability to disconnect. So while I'm teaching that, I teach actors how to step into this imaginary world, but then we also trigger out. A trigger out is very fast, and it's something that it's a tool that I give the actors so they have the ability to disconnect from whatever they're just doing. I want you to think of acting in this way. Acting in a performance is very similar to watching a performance. Meaning, if you're watching a play or a television show or a movie, as an audience member, you get invested in what you're watching. But when the show or the movie is over, it might linger with you a little bit, but it does, it's not so much that you can't disconnect. Up here, that it was a movie. That it was a television show. It's great if you're affected by it when it's happening, but then afterwards you can disconnect and say, oh, it was a television show that I watched. It was very emotional while I watched it, but it was a great experience. Acting is the same way. And when we learn it like that, there's really no difference to watching a film or acting in a film. It takes the same skills as far as committing to that while we're there. When you're watching a film, you let go of everything else. You do something called suspend disbelief. And you then just give yourself over to whatever it is you're watching. But then when it's done, you can bring yourself back in. You realize, oh yeah, I'm sitting in a movie theater, or I'm sitting at home, or these were actors I was watching in this story, like all of those type of things. So we have the ability to suspend disbelief in those moments and then come back out of it. Acting is the same thing. We suspend our disbelief, we step into these moments, but when we're done, we come back out of it. In that way, there's no contamination between your own life and your acting life, meaning this character that we're in. We simply allow ourselves to step in and then we step out. And then we have some other rules that I apply, very strict rules to keep from cross-contamination. We don't take anything home with us. We don't talk about certain things with each other. We don't do any of that. We make sure that whatever happens on stage stays on stage. Meaning whatever happens in our performance, we leave it alone. We don't go and then talk about it with other actors. We don't make it real in any way. And that allows us to be very, very, very safe in the approach. I actually find that some of the most fun I have is in the most damaged characters. Meaning a character in a story that is very devastated, heartbroken, they're going through trauma after trauma. As a character, I find it to be the most fun to do as an actor because it's something to explore, which is, I get to explore something different. And so when I'm in it, and I'm feeling these things and I'm doing these things. But when I'm done and I disconnect, it's such a rush. It's like, wow, I got to do that. So, and that's another misconception of acting, is that these very deep, difficult, traumatic roles for the character are difficult for us to do as the actor. And once you learn, those are the fun roles to do as an actor. The ones where we get to really, really push ourselves and kind of, go down those different rabbit holes, or as I like to say. So, yes, so just know that it's the way the approach is laid out. It's very safe in that way. Okay, so I have another question from Shelley. How would you use this technique when breaking down a script or developing a character? So part of the technique is learning script analysis. So script analysis is an important part of the process because we need to be able to read a script. And as an actor, we need to be able to see things that other people can't see. So that's part of the process, is learning how to see the story, what we call subtext, right? The text exists on the surface of the script, and we need to see what's below it, which is the feelings and intentions of uh, doing that. So that's part of learning how to do that, and that's actually part of the personalization. When I teach personalization, that's linked with script analysis, because part of what we're personalizing, meaning connecting to ourselves in a personal way, are all of these other things we need in the analysis: the relationships, the events of the characters' lives, the motivations and intentions in a character's life. I mean, all of those things we then bring in and understand at a deeper level. Developing the character is just that, the choices we make. So let me back up. So a character, as we define it, a character is simply a point of view. That's it. A character means it's a point of view. So our job when we quote unquote step into character, we're realigning our point of view of the world. So all of you right now are playing a character in life. And it's a character you've created over your lifetime to get to the point you are today. But your character, how you interact with the world, how you respond to things, how you feel about things, is all based in your very specific point of view in life. So when we step into another character in a story, what we do is we alter our point of view. It's still us. It's us like in a different universe, for example. It's us in a different timeline. It's us as if we were born in this place, to these parents, to this family, to these situations. It's us in that kind of realm. And so what we do the work to now take over the character's point of view, which needs to be our point of view, to then do this. So in developing this thing called character, that's what we're doing. We're taking on that point of view of the world. That's part of script analysis, breaking down the script. It's part of personalization. It's kind of all mixed together and happening at the same time. Now, there's different tools for each one. I mean, the toolbox in the approach is vast. It's very large, but it is all part of the process. Let's see, over on YouTube, I have a question over here, which is asking, this is kind of a separate, but I'll answer it really quick since I can get to it. How detrimental is it not to have your name being first on IMDb? Meaning, is it okay to be John Doe 6 or 7? It's really not detrimental at all, Giovanni. It's absolutely okay on IMDb to be listed anywhere, because you're going to link to your account and you can have personalized accounts, and so nowadays it's really okay. And as you gain more celebrity status in the industry, yours will be moved into the top position anyway, because it's going to be based on the projects you're involved in versus your name. So it's absolutely okay wherever you are in that positioning. Let's see, one more. Are there any tips and tricks on doing this technique? Well, really, the technique is learning it. That's really the tips to it. Is once you learn the technique and you learn the process of it, you'll then know how to execute it. My biggest advice, though, is there is no shortcut to the technique. There's not a summer workshop you're going to take that's going to teach you the whole thing. It's something that is learned over years. I mean, the foundational approach we have in studio it's 2 semesters long. It's 8 months long. It's 200 in-studio hours of training, and that's what we call the Master Meisner program. That's the foundational level of everything you need to know in the approach. 200 hours. Beyond, and that's in class, and then there's homework outside of that. So beyond that, then we have 10 additional semesters. Every semester is 100 hours long, so 10 additional semesters of ways to now refine all of the different pieces of your acting. So it's a long-term form of acting. It's a deeper approach. And so that's what I would say. That's how to do it. It's just, so my tip for this approach is get involved with a deeper level process of it. Meaning, if you're going to study it with a class studio or a conservatory that teaches what we call deep process. Meaning, they're not just teaching it very quickly, but they're teaching it long term. So yeah, that's what I would say there. And let's see, I have one more, and then I'm going to get back to the other questions. Let's see, do some actors get nervous, or don't they get nervous when they're performing? So all actors are nervous. That's, to me, that's one of the beautiful things of acting, is being anxious about it. When we first start acting, we feel like we don't want to be anxious at all, right? We want to get rid of our anxiety. But the truth is, our anxiety helps us. Our anxiety tells us that we are right there on the edge of something dangerous. I consider acting to be an extreme sport, because we think about extreme sports, skydiving or rock climbing, or whatever it is, surfing, or you think of an extreme sport, you do it for that rush of adrenaline. You do it because you want to feel alive. Well, acting, if you push yourself far enough to really exist in a moment and to really feel the things you need to feel, you have a lot of adrenaline that runs through you. It's dangerous to do. It's dangerous to be vulnerable publicly. It's dangerous to fully express yourself without any regard of what other people think. So in many ways, and this is of course as I get deeper into the process, but we realize that, wow, acting is really an extreme sport. So it's, so having the nerves of doing that, to me, tells you that it's important. When you're nervous about something, it's because you're nervous about the things that matter to you. You're nervous about the things that you care about, or that you want to have a positive outcome. Those are the things that we get nervous about. So nerves are a good thing. We learn how to work through them, of course, but they're a really good thing. Okay, so let's see. So this is something, so I teach directing as well. I teach directing over at the local university. It's directing the actor for film is what I specifically teach. And I use the technique in that. Because the question is, how can I use acting to become a better writer and or director? And you absolutely can. To me, first of all, directors need to study acting. Period. As a director, that's one of the main things you're directing. You're directing actors. How can you possibly direct an actor if you don't know what it is, what this thing called acting is? The best leaders are the ones who have been through it themselves. Think about that for a second. The best leaders are people who have been there themselves and who have gone through the struggle and understand, and now can work with you on getting you there too. So what I would say is, first of all, as a director, yes, study acting. Study whether it's this technique or any technique, but study something so you know what it's like to do that. Now, you don't have to be an actor yourself, but you want to be able to talk to other actors from a standpoint of, hey, I've been there. And some of our best directors were once actors, or sometimes still actors. And so they understand it, and now they're able to apply it. So it definitely helps. As far as a writer, there's so many of tools in acting. Because as an actor, we are kind of reverse engineering the script. So we're taking the script and going the other way to kind of break it apart and then bring it into the life. But you can take the tools and go the reverse direction with it and figure out the life parts and then how to make that into a script. So the tools we have as an actor absolutely work as a writer, and definitely will make you a stronger director. I encourage all of my film students to study acting. I said, if to be a director, that is the number one thing that you need to study. Everything else you have a team around you to handle. You have a cinematographer that's going to run the camera and set up the shots and give you what you want. You have a sound department that's doing that. You have a whole production department and an art department and you have all these other people around you, but you're responsible for the performance. So you have to really know what that means. And you need to speak in the language of the actor. And you do that by taking the acting class. Let's see. A couple more other questions that are in my two chats here. One over here, let's see, in YouTube, it says, can you start acting with no experience? Absolutely, you can start acting with no experience. And in fact, the people who have come into our program, we have actors of all different experience levels, right? So we have actors that have come in that have quite a bit of experience, that want to go now deeper and get into a higher level of their craft. And then we have actors that have not ever done a single thing. Like our class is the very first thing they've ever done. And believe it or not, the actors that have never done anything before typically pick up on the approach easier than actors that have been in the industry for 10 or 20 years. And it's simply because when you're in the industry for 10 or 20 years, if you don't have a solid deep level approach, you've developed other habits to acting, what we call technical habits. And typically those are bad habits. And so we have to undo the bad habits to then reapply the approach, which is doable. I mean, we do it all the time, but acting with no experience, yeah, start by taking a class. You can absolutely do that. You don't have to have any experience before you take a class in acting. Let's see, next question. While taking this class, is it possible to take small roles, or should someone wait until after the program? So great question. And so like here in Central Florida, where we are, when I have students that are in studio with us, we actually encourage them, because again, as I said, I work at the local university, and we have a few film schools here in town. I encourage students to take on small film roles, student film roles. There's not a lot of risk involved. There's nothing that's going to hurt you in any way. You can apply the craft that you're doing. Student films need actors, so it's a great way to get involved, and I do encourage that. So but I will say that I also say that if you're taking on any role while you're in the program, our class dates need to be blackout dates. Like, class is more important than anything else you're going to be working on in the industry. So yes, you can take on certain roles. Just list us as your blackout date. And the certification that we give, it's a certification of the completion of the Master Meisner program, which is the foundational, the first 8 months of the program. And that shows that you have completed a deep level process training, the foundational level of that. And with those initial 8 months, it allows you it gives you all of the tools to work in this industry, film, television, stage. So you can go to New York, you can go to LA, you can go to Toronto, you can Europe, and you can work at a high level in this industry. So that's why we have a certificate for that particular program. Okay, so let me go back and... Okay, so this question says, what about deeper emotions? Will the technique help me with those? Yeah, as I said before, the technique, actually my Meisner 2 class, which is the second semester in the program, is called Emotional Life. And we focus specifically, so based on everything that the students have gone through in the first 4 months, the next 4 months is all about emotions. We learn what emotions are. We learn how we as human beings process emotion. And then we have exercises that allows us to feel them and then allows us to process them, all very safely, in a way where you can step into it and then step out of it, and you have full control the entire time. So it gives you that kind of power. And once you realize that you can fully go into something and feel something that's emotional, and then you can step out of it, you have control to snap out of it anytime, it gives you confidence like you've never had before. So the approach absolutely gets into those deeper emotions and how to access them and how to utilize them. Uh, so, question: is the Master Meisner program offered online for those that don't live close to the studio? We do. We do offer it. We offer a live online version of it, meaning that through Zoom you can connect into the class remotely. We have students every semester that are from various parts of either the US or sometimes the world that will connect in and take the class live with us online. And you get to see in, you see the classroom, you can hear the classroom in the instruction. We can see you and hear you, and you can absolutely connect in with us that way, which is really cool. You know, I mean, obviously, I'd much prefer to have you with us in person if you live locally, but if you don't, we've been able to connect in with actors all over, and it's been such a blessing to be able to do that. All of that information is on our website too. So yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see what else I have. Let me see. Okay. How does someone, quote unquote, be in character when they are acting? So we hear this term, right? Being in character and becoming the character, and all of that. So we hear that, but what does that really mean? So the most simplistic way I can answer this question is there is no character. It's just you, right? There is no character. What we have is focus. So is it, like, in other words, we talked about the whole approach being outward focused. And then we all talked about the idea of character being a point of view. Well, if I've done all of my work, if I've done my personalization work to understand the relationships, to understand my point of view in this moment, then my job as the actor is to put all of my focus outward to my partner. So if you're my partner in the scene, I give you all of my focus. And then I really fight for what I need to do. And again, that's one of the tools that we have. It's to really fight for something, to really, if I need to convince you to be on my side, then I'm going to really convince you to be on my side. And I really do those things. And that is, quote unquote, being in character. What that term really means is being in the moment, existing right here, right now. And that's a muscle. It's something that as we work on it over and over and over, it becomes stronger. Our ability to exist in this living present moment, it can be longer and longer and longer. It can be more sustained. The difficulty about living in the moment is that our mind, thoughts, come in and we start thinking about the future, or we start thinking about the past. We're thinking about things that are outside the moment. So it takes mental focus to bring all of our attention to the right here and right now. And so that is really why that is so important, and we work on it through the entire process. We call it the core, and we never stop working on the core. It's so essential, and the core then allows you to be in the moment. That's what that is used for. Let's see. Can this technique really allow me to become a top tier actor? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's something that many A-list actors use today, and there's something that I say this technique. As an actor, you early on in your training, you learn a technique or an approach, but then as you begin to work more and more as the actor, you develop your own process. You take everything you've learned, and then so you don't have to wrap yourself around the approach, it wraps around you. So every single actor utilizes the approach in their specific way for their benefit. And so that's what I love about it. is the approach doesn't ask you to change who you are for the approach. It's saying, no, take everything, the approach, and wrap it around you and make it work for you. And many of the A-listers use this in the industry. In fact, what we teach at Truthful Acting Studios, it's based in Sanford Meisner, but there's other techniques we have layered on top of it. There's a technique called the Michael Chekhov approach, which has to do with psychophysicality, that is layered in there. And I use a lot of classical training, which is what is taught in London. I use a lot of that layered in there. So it's, what we teach is our own specific approach to acting, which is based in what I find to be the best methodologies around the world. So yes, it can allow you to compete with the best of the best from anywhere in the world. All right, so time for a couple more questions and then we'll keep going. So how do you deal with rejection, and what advice would you give to future actors to keep pursuing their dream? So, rejection. First of all, I don't like, this is something that I learned as a director instead of an actor. Because as an actor, I always felt the rejection of not getting a role. Meaning I go to an audition and then it goes to somebody else, and then I feel that somehow I was rejected by that, right? I mean, they had to reject me to accept somebody else. And I never really liked that feeling of that. But as the director, and as a casting director, which I've done many times, I realized that, wow, okay, so now as the director, I'm putting together a play or a film, and I need to cast actors. And I have, maybe I whittle it down to 5 actors that I'm thinking about for this one role, and I have to choose one. All 5 could do it, right? I have 5 actors, all can do this role. I need to be the one to choose who's going to be in it. And it's difficult because I know that the other 4 are going to feel rejected. And I don't want to do that because sometimes it has nothing to do with how strong you are as an actor. It has nothing to do with, you as a human being. It's not personal. It's just I'm constructing a story and I need all of my actors, my characters to blend, the chemistry between them, the types that they are. It needs to feel right for the production, and is really nothing you can do about that. So I learned on the directing and casting directing side that really not to look at it like rejection. You will be cast in the roles that are right for you. And the ones that you don't get, for whatever reason, maybe they weren't right for you. Maybe that's not your project, that's someone else's project. Instead, I would focus on gratitude. Be grateful for the opportunities that you do get, but also be grateful for others, right? You want to show gratitude and thanks to others, is, that they get their opportunity. Because it's important. It's important that we support each other in this industry. We support the other actors around us. And it's great when you see your colleagues get their opportunity to perform as well. And then don't worry, be patient, keep working, you will get your opportunity. The truth is you can't act in anything, right? There's certain things as a director that I need to look at. And again, it's if you're not right for the production, you're not right for the production. And so that's okay, because there are productions you are right for. And those are the ones that you'll get. Okay, all right. So, wow, we've made it through almost an hour at this point. I really appreciate you all hanging in there while we had the technical difficulties in the beginning. I'm sorry about that again. Love the fact that you're all here with me. I love the interaction. It's great. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I do these about once a month or so. So check back. I'll be announcing the next one soon. And so I'd love to have you back on again. But if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at info@truthfulacting.com, or you can call or text us at the number below. And Samantha, who was on the chat with us, she's the one that you'll be reaching. So she'll get back to you and answer any questions you might have, whether it's about our program. We're constantly enrolling for different semesters. We're enrolling for a semester right now. So if you want to be with us, if you're able to be live in studio with us, we have seats available. If you want to be live on Zoom with us, an online seat, we have seats available for that as well. And we also have our online prepackaged courses as well. And you can look, that's on our website as well, or you can go to truthfulactingonline.com to see those. That's a great way to work at your own pace. And again, it's very similar to what, it's lecture style. I go much more in depth on certain things. So we do have that available too. So thank you so much. It was great having you here. Great working with you all today. And I look forward to seeing you all again. So thanks so much. Bye.